The wind carried the scent of rain and grease across the cluttered driveway of Joe's auto in repair. Tucked in the heart of a small blue-collar town in Pennsylvania, the garage didn't look like much. Peeling paint, a rusted Coca-Cola sign from the 70s, and a battered radio permanently tuned to classic rock. It was a place where people brought their last hopes and their oldest trucks. And in the middle of it all stood Joe Miller, a quiet, broad-shouldered man with worn hands and a heart too big for his flannel shirt. He was the kind of person people waved to, even if they didn't know him. The kind who fixed your car on Christmas. He even wouldn't take a dime for it. He'd inherited the garage from his father and never left town. Why would he? This was home. Even though his dreams once stretched far beyond oil stains and crankshafts, Joe had found peace in simplicity. But that peace was about to be shaken. A silver Bentley, shining like a spaceship against the mud-stained parking lot, pulled up with an impatient hiss of brakes. The kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. Joe looked up from under the hood of a '94 Chevy, squinting at the unfamiliar sight. The door swung open, and a woman in sleek heels stepped out. She was striking, in the way storms are striking, calculated, untouchable, and powerful. Her long black coat flapped in the breeze like a cape. Sunglasses masked her eyes, but her posture screamed impatience. She clicked toward Joe like a ticking clock. "I was told this is the only garage within 50 miles that still works on classic engines," she said crisply, pulling off her shades. Joe wiped his hands and walked over, taking in the sight of her Bentley with curiosity. "Depends on the engine," he said evenly, "and how broken it is. It's a 1965 Aston Martin DB5. My father's. He passed away 2 weeks ago. The car is sentimental." Joe's expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." She looked away just for a moment. Something in her armor cracked. It was supposed to be ready for the board gala tonight. "A tribute, but my regular team gave up. Said it's unfixable in a day." Joe nodded, slowly walking around the car, like an artist circling a canvas. The engine was humming low, then choking, spitting, almost pleading for attention. Stopped. The hood and whistled low. "This thing's seen better days," he muttered. "And if you fix it," she smirked suddenly, trying to reclaim her commanding tone, "I'll marry you." She was joking, clearly. Throwaway line to mask her desperation. But Joe chuckled anyway. "Well, I better get to work then," he replied, as if she had offered him coffee instead of a life-changing deal. As the hours ticked by, Joe worked in silence. Grease caked his hands and sweat trickled down his brow. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hills. Inside, the garage was lit only by the low-hanging bulbs and the sound of his tools whispering against steel. The woman whose name he'd later learn was Sienna Blake. CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the world, paced like a caged tiger, but something began to shift as the storm deepened. Sienna found herself watching him more closely. There was a grace in Joe's movements, a rhythm. She'd spent her life around people who talked big and delivered little. But this man, he didn't boast. He just worked. "You always this quiet?" she asked finally. Joe didn't look up. "Only when I'm concentrating," she smiled, despite herself. Over the next few hours, they talked first about the car, then about her father, then hesitantly about her. Sienna confessed that she had grown up poor, that success hadn't come easy. Her father had built her first computer with parts from junkyards. The Aston Martin had been his dream car, bought with his retirement bonus. Joe shared his own story. A mother lost too young. A father who taught him everything about engines and ethics. Dreams of becoming a mechanical engineer derailed by life. Debt and the need to take care of others. They were from different worlds. But somehow, in the quiet hum of the rain and the glow of the shop lights, they met in the middle. Then came the moment of truth. Joe turned the key. The engine roared too. Life smoother than it had sounded in years. Sienna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She looked at him, really looked, and something flickered in her eyes that wasn't sarcasm. "You actually did it." "I said I would." And then she laughed, really laughed. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, you fixed it. Which means, she teased, arching an eyebrow. I expect a good tip, Joe said, smiling, and maybe a dance at the gala. Deal, she whispered. The storm had passed by the time they reached the gala. The raindrops still clung to the windows of the hotel ballroom like faded stars. Inside, the space sparkled with gold chandeliers and voices muffled by champagne. Every table was a garden of white roses and flickering candles. Suits and satin dresses floated through the room, stitched together by ambition, networking, and old money. Sienna Blake walked in first, shoulders squared, heels clicking with the confidence of a woman used to owning every room she entered. Tonight something had changed. Her stride wasn't about control, it was about pride. She was proud of the man walking just a few steps behind her. Joe, in a borrowed black suit that barely fit across his broad chest, looked as out of place as a wrench in a wine glass, and yet he carried himself with calm simplicity, the kind that couldn't be faked. People stared, not because of his rough hands or the grease still under his nails, but because of the way Sienna looked at him. Not like a joke, not like a pity project, but like someone who mattered. This way, she whispered, guiding him toward the front of the room where the Aston Martin sat under a silk tarp. The moment the cloth came off, gasps followed. Her father's prized car gleamed under the lights, looking like it had just driven off a 1965 showroom floor. Even the harshest critics fell silent. Then came the applause. Not polite, forced clapping, but real appreciation. The kind of recognition Joe never cared about, but still deserved, ladies and gentlemen. Sienna said into the mic, her voice unexpectedly soft. Tonight was supposed to be a tribute to my father. I thought I had everything planned perfectly, but the car meant most to him, and it was broken. I'd almost given up. She paused, glanced at Joe, until someone reminded me that miracles don't always come from boardrooms and billion-dollar budgets. Sometimes they come from a small garage and a kind heart. More applause. Joe's ears turned red. He hated attention. Sienna handed him the mic. Say something, she mouthed. He cleared his throat. I don't do speeches, Joe said. A few chuckles. I just fix things. But I guess, sometimes when you fix something with love, it ends up fixing people too. Silence. Then a standing ovation. Sienna stepped closer. You ready for that dance? I thought you were joking. He said, I thought I was too, she whispered. Later that night, under soft lights and a jazz band's gentle hum, they danced. The room faded around them. Sienna wasn't the CEO anymore, and Joe wasn't just a mechanic. They were simply two people scared, tired, hopeful. I never really meant what I said about marrying you, she said, watching his eyes. For a reaction, I figured, Joe replied with a smile. But I think I meant it more than I realized. Joe stopped moving. The moment stretched. What are you saying? She swallowed. That I don't want this to be a one-night gala. Story? That. Maybe, if you're not doing anything tomorrow, you could come to the city. See my world. Maybe stay a while. And what if I say yes? Then maybe I'll say that thing again, but without laughing. Joe exhaled like a man who had been holding his breath for years. You're serious? Haven't been this? Serious since I bought my first company, she whispered. And I haven't been this scared since I got under the hood of your car. They laughed, then danced closer. The next day was quieter, but heavier. Joe returned to his garage. The gravel crunched under his boots, the sky stretched out above the valley like an old friend, and the radio still played the same classic. Rock tunes. But something in him had shifted. The place that had been his world now felt small. He stared at the phone number she'd written on a sticky note. No business card, just her handwriting. He picked up the phone a dozen times, put it down each time. Then finally he called. I was hoping you would. Sienna said on the other end. That weekend she came back not in her Bentley, but in jeans and sneakers. With greasy fingers and questions about carburetors, they spent the day fixing a motorcycle together, laughing, swearing, sharing coffee and stories. She was raw, here less polished, more real. And Joe saw something he hadn't seen in years: possibility. Weeks passed. Sienna started visiting more often, and she brought her laptop to work from the garage. Soon, her driver dropped her, off like it was normal, and Joe started sketching designs again. Blueprints, small ideas, big ones. A project they could build together. Their lives so different began, weaving like thread through a loom, the town whispered. Then they rooted for them. Then came the test. A major investor backed out of Sienna's company. She was days away from launching a new product. Everything was at risk. She had to leave fast. Joe helped her pack. "I don't want to go," she said, her eyes full of worry. "But you have to," Joe said gently, "and I'll be right here." "Don't say that like it's easy." "It's not. But I'd rather missed you than hold you back." She hugged him hard. Then she was gone. 3 months passed. No visits, just texts, late-night calls. "Missed flights, I'm sorry, Joe. Just one more week." He never blamed her, but the silence started growing then. One day, she showed up at the garage again, tired, pale, her voice trembling. "I lost the launch. Lost a deal. Investors want me out. They said I'm too emotional, too attached to human." Joe looked at her like he always did, with softness. "That's what I love most about you." She broke down in his arms. "I wanted to be everything. But I feel like nothing right now." Joe held her tight. "You don't have to be everything. Just be here." Then he did something he'd never done. He pulled out a small, rusted metal ring, one his father had made out of engine parts for his mother years ago. It wasn't flashy. It didn't sparkle. But it was honest. "I don't have a mansion. I don't have a boardroom. I don't even have clean fingernails most days," Joe said, voice low. "But I have love, and a place in my heart that only fits you." His tears filled her eyes, she said, laughing through them. "The first thing I ever said to you was a joke. And look where it got us. So now I'll say it again. But I'm not laughing this time." Joe blinked. "If you'll still have me, if you'll still fix things with me, then marry me." Joe grinned. "I thought you'd never ask." Year later, they opened a coned business, a tech startup that built sustainable engines for rural towns. She handled the boardroom. He handled the workshop. They met in the middle every night with dirt on their jeans and love in their eyes. People still talked about the story, how a joke became a promise, how a CEO found her home not in a penthouse, but in a small garage, and how a humble mechanic didn't just fix a car, he helped fix a broken heart.